Deep within a forgotten hydro dam, an impossible sound lured a series of teams into a sealed intake tunnel, from which none returned. If you enjoy documentary-style horror case files, subscribe to Whispers in the Dark. The massive structure, a cornerstone of regional power, began to register a powerful, rhythmic vibration emanating from a long decommissioned and demonstrably dry intake tunnel. Acoustic surveys repeatedly pinpointed the anomaly's origin deep within the sealed concrete, consistent with heavy machinery operating where no power or mechanism could possibly exist.
The initial incident occurred during a standard facility integrity check. Maintenance supervisor Elias Thorne assigned technician David Miller to a section of the lower access tunnels adjacent to the decommissioned intake array. This particular array had been sealed with reinforced concrete for over 3 decades, its primary purpose long obsolete. Miller's assignment included thermal imaging sweeps and vibration diagnostics along the shared wall with the sealed tunnel. His first report, submitted during morning operations, indicated an anomaly. Miller noted a subtle, persistent low-frequency vibration. He described it as a deep, resonant hum, barely perceptible without specialized equipment. The vibration was not consistent with the dam's operational turbines, which were located in a separate section and monitored by distinct systems. Miller initially attributed the reading to a faulty sensor or sympathetic resonance from distant heavy machinery. However, recalibrating his equipment yielded identical results. The hum persisted. Supervisor Thorne reviewed Miller's initial data. The readings showed a distinct rhythmic thrumming, localized to a specific point along the sealed wall. Thorne instructed Miller to re-verify the integrity of his equipment and conduct a follow-up sweep. Miller complied. His second sweep, completed within the hour, produced amplified readings. The vibration was now more pronounced, distinct enough to be felt faintly through the concrete without direct contact. Its frequency registered consistently around 35 Hz, characteristic of large-scale rotational equipment. Thorne decided to personally assess the situation. He joined Miller in the lower access tunnel. Upon arrival, Thorne confirmed Miller's observations. The low thrum was undeniable, a steady, powerful pulse against the heavy concrete. It felt like a dormant engine suddenly activated beneath their feet. Thorne deployed a portable acoustic analysis unit. The device immediately registered the anomalous vibration, confirming its strength and precise location deep within the sealed intake tunnel. The internal sensors of the dam structure registered no corresponding energy output or mechanical stress in the surrounding operational systems. The vibration was isolated, anomalous. Thorne consulted the dam's original blueprints and updated schematics. The area indicated by the acoustic readings was unequivocally marked as a solid concrete seal, an abandoned conduit. No electrical lines, no hydraulic systems, no access points existed within that section. No machinery had ever been installed there, nor could it operate without power. The internal pressure gauges for the entire decommissioned section indicated a complete vacuum, a dry, empty space. Yet, the persistent thrumming echoed from within this sealed void. It was a physical impossibility, a significant industrial anomaly that defied every engineering principle governing the structure. Thorne initiated standard emergency protocols for an unknown structural anomaly. He immediately contacted facility management, reporting a significant, unidentifiable vibratory source emanating from the decommissioned intake tunnel. Miller was tasked with setting up an array of high-sensitivity accelerometers along the entire length of the shared concrete wall. These devices were calibrated to record minute seismic activity and acoustic fluctuations. Thorne also ordered a full system diagnostic of the dam's main operational turbines and adjacent infrastructure. searching for any sympathetic vibrations or unreported component failures that could explain the phenomenon. All operational systems reported normal parameters. The thrumming remained an isolated event. As Miller deployed the accelerometers, the subtle vibration intensified. What had previously been a faint hum now registered as a palpable low-frequency pulse against the concrete. The accelerometers confirmed a consistent increase in amplitude. The frequency remained stable at 35 Hz, but the energy output grew. Miller reported a new observation: a distinct rhythmic pressure felt in the air, a deep, resonant push that seemed to emanate directly from the wall. This was no longer just a vibration in the material. It was now an atmospheric disturbance within the access tunnel itself. Thorne returned to the monitoring station with Miller. The readouts from the newly deployed accelerometers displayed a precise, escalating waveform. The energy signature was consistent with a massive, enclosed object in continuous rotating motion. This was deeply unsettling, given the sealed, empty nature of the tunnel. Thorne retrieved a specialized thermal imager designed for detecting subsurface temperature variations. He directed its beam across the reinforced concrete wall. Initially, the wall presented a uniform thermal signature, consistent with ambient tunnel temperatures. Then a subtle change appeared. A faint, localized thermal bloom began to manifest on the concrete surface, directly corresponding to the area of the most intense thrumming. The temperature increase was minor, less than 1 degree Celsius, but it was distinct and isolated. It pulsed rhythmically, mirroring the 35 Hz vibration. This indicated an energy transfer, a generation of heat from within the sealed void. The thermal bloom grew gradually, becoming slightly more defined over a period of minutes. It wasn't a sudden spike, but a slow, undeniable emanation. Thorne and Miller observed this in silence. The implications were clear. Something was actively generating kinetic and thermal energy inside a space that should be inert. The sealed concrete, demonstrably solid, was now radiating heat from an impossible source. The anomaly was no longer purely acoustic, it was also thermal. The sealed tunnel, once believed to be inert, was now demonstrably active, radiating heat from an impossible internal source. Thorne and Miller continued to observe the escalating thermal anomaly. The initial, localized bloom began to expand, slowly spreading across a wider section of the reinforced concrete wall. The temperature differential, initially less than 1 degree Celsius, steadily increased, registering a full 2 degrees above the ambient tunnel temperature. This radiant heat was palpable. Simultaneously, the low-frequency thrumming intensified. No longer just a vibration felt through the floor, but a deep, resonant hum now clearly audible within the access tunnel. It vibrated the air itself. The acoustic analysis unit registered a consistent increase in amplitude, pushing its upper limits. The dominant 35 Hz frequency was now accompanied by a series of higher harmonics, faint at first, then growing into a low, continuous whine. This layered sound created a distinct, uncomfortable pressure in the ears. Miller, visibly affected, reported dizziness and a persistent low-grade headache. Small, almost imperceptible vibrations began to affect other structural elements in the access tunnel, dislodging fine dust and minute concrete chips from the ceiling and upper wall sections, falling silently to the floor. The air grew perceptibly warmer and took on a faint metallic odor. Thorne attempted to re-establish contact with Central Facility Management. His radio transmission was immediately met with heavy, rhythmic static, perfectly synchronized with the thrumming from the wall. Communication was impossible. As Thorne lowered the radio, a series of distinct hairline stress fractures began to propagate across the concrete surface directly above the area of the most intense thermal radiation.
These fractures were thin, dark lines against the gray concrete, and they appeared to deepen and lengthen with each rhythmic pulse emanating from within the sealed void. The material itself was under immense, visible strain. Miller, now holding his head, gasped. He pointed a shaking finger at the wall. From one of the newly formed hairline cracks, a minute, almost invisible wisp of vapor began to emerge. It was not steam, but a dry, faint exhalation, carrying a sharp, acrid scent of ozone, layered with the metallic tang. The thrumming deepened further, becoming a guttural groan that seemed to resonate deep within their chest cavities. The floor itself began to vibrate more violently. The structural integrity of the sealed section was visibly compromised, actively yielding to an unseen internal force. The sealed tunnel, once merely active, was now demonstrably tearing itself apart from within.
The minute wisp of vapor emerging from the hairline crack rapidly increased in volume. It no longer seemed dry, but carried a damp, heavy quality, thickening into a visible plume that snaked upwards along the concrete surface. The acrid ozone smell intensified, becoming caustic and metallic, stinging Thorne's eyes and throat. Miller gagged, clutching his stomach, his face pale and slick with sweat. He stumbled backward, collapsing against the opposite wall, struggling for breath as the guttural groan from within the sealed tunnel rose to an unbearable pitch. The continuous whine of higher harmonics now seemed to drill directly into their skulls, a physical assault. The hairline stress fractures above the thermal bloom rapidly expanded. They branched out like dark lightning across the concrete, deepening with each pulse. Small chunks of reinforced concrete, no larger than a fist, began to spall from the wall, striking the floor with dull thuds. The entire access tunnel now vibrated violently. Tools left on the floor skittered and clattered. The air pressure became oppressive, feeling like a physical weight pressing down. Thorne struggled to remain upright, bracing himself against the control panel, his focus locked on the disintegrating wall. Miller let out a choked cry, sliding to the floor, his body racked with tremors. He was disoriented, struggling to articulate coherent words, pointing a trembling hand towards the wall. The expanding plume of vapor pulsed with a faint internal luminescence, a cold, pale blue light that flickered erratically. The thrumming reached its peak, a deafening, all-encompassing roar that vibrated through bone and organ, annihilating all other sensory input. It felt less like a vibration and more like the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Then a new sound manifested, tearing through the cacophony. It was a wet, tearing rip, followed by a deeper, cavernous groan of stressed concrete and twisted rebar. A section of the reinforced concrete wall, approximately 2 meters by 1 meter, directly above the most intense thermal and acoustic anomaly, suddenly gave way. It did not explode outwards. Rather, it seemed to be drawn inwards, collapsing into the void with a sound of crushing stone and snapping metal. A dense, opaque cloud of particulate matter and vapor instantly billowed out from the newly formed breach, flooding the tunnel. The cold, pale blue light pulsed erratically from within the expanding cloud, momentarily illuminating swirling eddies of what appeared to be fine gray dust mixed with the now caustic vapor. The ozone scent became overwhelming, burning. The thrumming continued, but it was now distorted, modulated by a new, grinding, mechanical shriek that emanated from deep within the breach. Thorne shouted Miller's name, his voice lost in the roar. He tried to move towards Miller, but the floor buckled beneath him.
The last transmission from the dam's internal sensor array, moments before the system failed, registered an unprecedented, localized structural integrity collapse within the decommissioned intake array, followed by a complete loss of all telemetry from the lower access tunnels. The thrumming abruptly ceased. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, replacing the overwhelming roar. The tunnel was dark.
The sudden, absolute silence was a greater shock than the preceding roar. The lower access tunnel was plunged into total darkness. Thorne's last attempt to reach Miller was cut short as the floor buckled beneath him. The dam's internal sensor array, moments before its complete failure, registered a catastrophic structural integrity collapse in the immediate vicinity of the decommissioned intake array. All telemetry from the lower access tunnels ceased. No further communication or sensor data was received from the area where Supervisor Thorne and Technician Miller were last confirmed. Emergency response teams, dispatched after automated system alarms failed to reset and personnel could not establish contact, arrived at the access tunnel approximately 1 hour later. They found the heavy blast door secured, but the air within the tunnel was thick with a metallic, ozonic odor and permeated by fine particulate dust. Visual inspection confirmed significant structural damage. A section of the reinforced concrete wall, precisely where Thorne and Miller had been working, had completely imploded. The breach, roughly 2 meters by 1 meter, led into an internal void. Recovery personnel, utilizing high-intensity spotlights, could not ascertain the depth of this newly exposed space. The tunnel beyond was not empty, dry, or consistent with blueprints of the original intake system. Instead, the void glowed faintly with an intermittent cold blue luminescence, reminiscent of the light observed by Miller before the collapse. No trace of Thorne, Miller, or their equipment was ever found. The search was extensive, covering the tunnel and the newly exposed breach, but yielded nothing. Post-incident acoustic surveys revealed that the rhythmic, low-frequency thrumming had not entirely ceased. Instead, its point of origin had shifted. Sensors detected intermittent pulses now emanating from a significantly greater depth, originating from beyond the newly formed void. The frequency remained consistent at 35 Hz, but the energy signature suggested immense distance and an even more massive source. The area surrounding the breach maintained an elevated thermal signature, 2 degrees Celsius above ambient even hours after the incident. The official inquiry concluded the collapse resulted from unforeseen structural fatigue, compounded by decades of micro-vibrations and localized corrosive gas pockets. Thorne and Miller's symptoms were attributed to gas exposure. Their disappearance was theorized as instantaneous engulfment within the collapsing material, making recovery impossible. This official explanation, however, failed to account for the persistent thermal and acoustic anomalies, the internal blue luminescence, or the total absence of any physical remains. Today, the entire section of the lower access tunnels remains permanently sealed and inaccessible. Despite the official findings, sensitive acoustic monitoring equipment occasionally registers the deep, rhythmic thrumming. It still echoes from the sealed depths, a persistent, impossible heartbeat within the stone. If you want to hear more unsettling truths hidden beneath the surface, subscribe to Whispers in the Dark.